When has a friend completely betrayed your trust? Vera and I met during freshman orientation, when we were both too nervous to eat alone in the dining hall. She had this infectious laugh that made everyone around her smile, and within a week, we were inseparable. For 3 years, she was the sister I never had. We shared everything from clothes to secrets to late-night existential crises over terrible dorm coffee. She knew about my childhood stutter that flared up when I was anxious. She knew I'd never had a serious boyfriend because I was terrified of being vulnerable. She knew about my mom's drinking problem and how I sent half my work-study money home to help with groceries. Most importantly, she knew about the internship. The Meridian Foundation internship was my golden ticket, a paid position at the city's most prestigious nonprofit, working directly under Director Harrison Webb. Only one student from our university got selected each year, and it guaranteed acceptance into any graduate program. I'd been preparing for 2 years, volunteering at 3 different organizations, maintaining a perfect GPA, and writing application essays until my fingers cramped. Vera supported me through all of it. She proofread my application 17 times, drove me to volunteer events when my car broke down, and listened to me practice my interview responses until she could recite them herself. When I got the call that I'd made it to the final round, she screamed louder than I did. "You've got this," she said, squeezing my hands. "Harrison Webb would be crazy not to choose you." The final interview was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. I spent the entire week preparing, buying my first real business suit with money I'd saved for months. Vera helped me practice answering questions about my experience with at-risk youth, my 5-year plan, and my thoughts on nonprofit sustainability. Thursday night, she surprised me with a celebration dinner at Romano's, way too expensive for our budget. But she insisted. "You deserve this," she said, raising her water glass. "Tomorrow's just a formality. You're going to change the world." I believed her completely. Friday morning, I woke up with food poisoning, violent, debilitating sickness that left me curled up on my bathroom floor, barely able to speak. I called Vera, crying. "I can't miss this interview," I gasped between waves of nausea. "I can't." "Call them," she said urgently. "Explain what happened. Ask to reschedule." I tried calling the foundation, but it went straight to voicemail. The main office, the director's assistant, even the general information line. Nothing. I was panicking, throwing up every 20 minutes, watching my future slip away. Vera arrived an hour later with Gatorade and determination. "I have an idea," she said. "What if I go in your place, just to explain the situation face to face? Ask them to reschedule. I'll drive there right now." It seemed like my only option. I gave her my application folder, my portfolio, and the business suit that now hung loose on my dehydrated frame. She promised to call immediately after speaking with them. By evening, I felt human again. Vera still hadn't called. When she finally answered around 9 p.m., her voice sounded strange. "They were really understanding," she said quickly. "Harrison Webb said to call Monday to reschedule." Relief flooded through me. Thank God. What was he like? Professional? Kind of intimidating? "Look, I'm exhausted from driving around all day. Can we talk tomorrow?" Something felt off, but I was too grateful to question it. Monday morning, I called the foundation. The receptionist put me through to Director Webb's assistant. "I'm sorry," she said, confusion clear in her voice, "but we already selected our intern on Friday. Vera Hutchinson was exceptional. We were impressed by her passion and preparedness." My phone slipped from my hand. Vera had stolen my identity, walked into my interview wearing my suit, carrying my portfolio, and somehow convinced them she was me. The internship I'd worked 3 years for was now hers. When I called her, she didn't answer. I drove to her dorm, but her roommate said she'd moved out over the weekend. No forwarding address. I couldn't prove anything. They had her signature, her interview responses, her promise to start Monday. As far as the foundation knew, I was some crazy person claiming to be someone else. But Vera made one mistake. She didn't know about the backup plan I'd never told her about. 3 months earlier, I'd started documenting everything related to my internship preparation. Not because I didn't trust Vera, but because my academic advisor suggested keeping detailed records for future graduate school applications. I had timestamps, photos, email confirmations, even recordings of practice sessions. Most importantly, I had video evidence of our Thursday night dinner conversation, where Vera explicitly discussed my upcoming interview in detail. She'd been worried about my nerves, so I'd recorded myself practicing responses to calm my anxiety. In the background of those videos, you could clearly hear her coaching me through answers about my nonprofit experience she didn't have. I also had my volunteer timesheets from 3 different organizations, each requiring biometric fingerprint scanning for security clearance. Vera had never volunteered anywhere. She'd spent most weekends at parties while I was serving meals at homeless shelters and tutoring kids at the community center. The foundation required extensive background checks, including verification of all volunteer hours. If Vera had claimed my experiences, the discrepancy would eventually surface. I gathered everything and drove to the foundation's headquarters Monday afternoon. Instead of demanding to speak with Director Webb, I asked to meet with their HR department about a potential case of identity theft. Margaret Thornfield, the HR director, listened to my story with increasing concern. When I showed her the documentation, videos of Vera helping me prepare for my interview, email threads where she referred to it as my opportunity, bank records showing I'd purchased the suit, her expression grew grim. "This is extremely serious," she said. "If what you're saying is true, this could constitute fraud." She called Director Webb immediately. Within an hour, I was sitting in his office, laying out the evidence chronologically. The most damning piece was a text message I'd screenshotted, sent to my mom Friday morning. "Vera's going to the foundation to reschedule my interview because I'm sick. Wish me luck." My mom had responded with a photo of her lighting a candle at church, praying for my success. Director Webb studied everything carefully. "These volunteer records show 3 years of consistent service," he said. But the background check for Vera Hutchinson shows no volunteer history whatsoever. The foundation's security footage sealed it. The cameras showed Vera entering the building Friday at 1:45 p.m., wearing my navy blue suit, carrying my distinctive leather portfolio, a graduation gift from my grandmother with my initials embossed on the front. But here's what made me angrier than anything else. During her interview, Vera had talked about growing up in poverty and working to support her family. She'd stolen not just my opportunity, but my personal story, turning my genuine struggles into her fictional narrative. The foundation immediately terminated her internship. But that wasn't enough for me. I spent the next week uncovering the extent of Vera's deception. She'd lied about almost everything during our 3-year friendship. Her father wasn't a struggling mechanic. He owned 4 auto shops. Her financial aid wasn't need-based. Her family was wealthy enough to pay full tuition. She'd never had to choose between textbooks and meals like I had. Most disturbing was what I found in her social media history. Dating back to freshman year, she'd been screenshotting our private conversations and mocking them in group chats with her sorority sisters. My anxiety attacks, my family's financial struggles, my insecurities about dating, all of it had been entertainment for her. One particularly cruel post from sophomore year showed a photo of me crying after bombing a statistics exam, with the caption, "Local charity case discovers consequences of not studying." Tragic, really. 43 likes from people I'd considered friends. I discovered she'd been systematically using information I shared to gain advantages. When I mentioned my mom's job interview at the hospital, Vera had applied for a work-study position there the same day. When I talked about my research project on urban food deserts, she'd submitted a nearly identical proposal for her sociology class. When I'd been excited about getting accepted to join Professor Martinez's research team, she'd convinced him to let her join too by claiming we were planning to collaborate. The pattern was clear. Vera had been mining my life for opportunities for 3 years, but the internship theft was different. This time, she'd crossed a line that would have permanent consequences for my future. I filed a formal complaint with the university's Academic Integrity Board. With the evidence I'd gathered, they launched a full investigation. The process took 2 months, during which Vera tried to contact me repeatedly. Her messages shifted from apologetic to defensive to outright hostile. "You're destroying my life over a misunderstanding," she texted. "I was just trying to help you by explaining the situation. When that didn't work, she tried gaslighting. You're remembering things wrong. I never volunteered to impersonate you. You asked me to go in your place." Finally, she resorted to threats. "If you don't drop this, I'll tell everyone about your family's drinking problem and how you steal money from the tip jar at work." I screenshotted everything. The university's investigation revealed she'd committed multiple violations: identity theft, academic dishonesty, and fraud. They found evidence of her plagiarizing my research proposals and even copying sections of my personal essays for her own scholarship applications. The Academic Integrity Board's decision was swift and severe: immediate expulsion, with a permanent notation on her transcript explaining the circumstances. But I wasn't finished. I'd learned that Vera had been accepted to several graduate programs based on essays that plagiarized my work. I contacted each admissions office with evidence of her academic dishonesty. Within weeks, every acceptance was rescinded. The Meridian Foundation offered me the internship position immediately, but I'd already accepted a better opportunity. Director Webb had been so impressed by how I'd handled the situation that he'd recommended me to his former colleague at the National Urban Development Coalition. They offered me a full-time position with benefits, starting immediately after graduation. Vera's parents called me, begging me to reconsider the university complaint. Her father offered to pay for my entire senior year tuition if I'd withdraw the charges. Her mother sobbed into the phone about how their daughter had made a mistake and didn't deserve to have her entire future destroyed. "She made a choice," I told them. "This isn't a mistake. It's a pattern of deception that's been going on for years." I hung up and blocked their numbers. 3 weeks later, I was working late in the library when Vera appeared at my table. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, unwashed hair, wrinkled clothes. The confident girl who'd stolen my identity was gone. "Can we please talk?" she whispered, glancing around at the other students. Against my better judgment, I followed her to a private study room. "I need you to understand," she began, tears already streaming down her face. "I never meant for things to go this far. When I walked into that building Friday, I really was planning to just explain your situation and ask them to reschedule." "Then what happened?" I asked. She was quiet for a long moment. "The receptionist assumed I was you," she said. "You must be here for the internship interview." And instead of correcting her, I just nodded. "Why?" "Because I wanted to see what it felt like," she said, "to be you for an hour. You had this amazing opportunity, this bright future planned out, people who believed in you. And I had nothing." I stared at her. "You had everything. Your family has money. You didn't have to work 3 jobs. You could have applied for any internship you wanted. But I wasn't qualified for anything that mattered," she said. "I didn't have your volunteer experience or your dedication or your goodness. I was just a spoiled girl coasting through college. So you decided to steal my life instead of building your own?" She flinched. "I know how it sounds. But when I was sitting in Harrison Webb's office, answering questions about working with disadvantaged youth, I felt like I was finally the person I wanted to be. Someone who made a difference. Using my experiences, my stories, my pain, I convinced myself I could do the internship justice," she said quietly. "That maybe if I got the position, I could become the person you already were, by destroying my future in the process. I thought maybe you'd get another chance. There would be other internships. But this felt like my only shot at becoming someone worth knowing." I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, but a kind of sad understanding. Vera had spent 3 years so envious of my struggles that she'd convinced herself they were desirable. While I'd been working multiple jobs and sending money home, she'd seen purpose and meaning instead of exhaustion and stress. You were already someone worth knowing, I said finally. You just never bothered to figure out who that was. She looked up hopefully. Does that mean? No, I cut her off. It means I understand why you did it. But understanding doesn't change what you took from me, or how you humiliated me, or the years of friendship you faked. It wasn't all fake, she protested. I really did care about you. No, you cared about the version of me that made you feel better about yourself. You cared about having access to my life so you could use pieces of it when convenient. Vera started crying harder. I've lost everything. The university, my graduate school acceptances, my internship. My parents are barely speaking to me. I don't know what I'm going to do. Figure it out, I said, standing up. Without stealing someone else's roadmap this time. As I reached the door, she called out desperately. Will you ever be able to forgive me? I turned back to look at her one last time, my former best friend, sitting alone in a study room, surrounded by the consequences of her choices. I don't know, I said honestly. But that's not your problem anymore. I graduated summa cum laude that spring. At the ceremony, I saw Vera's parents in the crowd, looking lost and heartbroken. They'd come hoping to see their daughter walk across the stage, not knowing she'd been expelled months earlier. My parents sat in the front row, beaming with pride. My mom had been sober for 6 months, the longest stretch since I was 12. She'd framed the article about my new job that appeared in our hometown newspaper, Local Girl Land's Dream Position at National Coalition. Director Webb from the Meridian Foundation attended my graduation party. He told everyone how impressed he'd been with my integrity and thoroughness during the investigation. In 30 years of nonprofit work, he said, raising his glass, I've rarely met someone so young with such clear moral conviction. The coalition is lucky to have her. But the moment that meant the most came when my little brother pulled me aside during the party. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. Not just for the job, but for how you handled everything with Vera. You could have let her get away with it. Why would I do that? Because it would have been easier. Because she was your friend. Because people will always tell you to be the bigger person and let things go. He paused. But you proved that sometimes fighting back is the right thing to do. I started my position at the National Urban Development Coalition 2 weeks after graduation. My first project involved developing educational programs for at-risk youth, the same population I'd been volunteering with for years. The work was challenging and meaningful, exactly what I'd dreamed of. 6 months into the job, I received an unexpected email from Vera. I know you probably won't read this, she wrote, but I needed to try one more time to apologize. Not because I want forgiveness, but because you deserve to know that I understand now what I took from you. After the expulsion, I moved back home and got a job at my father's auto shop. For the first time in my life, I had to work for something without cheating or taking shortcuts. It was humbling and exhausting and sometimes humiliating, but it was also honest. I spent months being angry at you for ruining my life, but eventually I realized you didn't ruin anything. You just held me accountable for ruining it myself. I've started volunteering at a local literacy program. It's small, unglamorous work, nothing like the prestigious internship I stole from you, but it's mine. I'm building something real for the first time. I'll never be able to undo what I did or give back what I took, but I wanted you to know that your integrity and how you handled everything taught me something about the person I want to become. I hope you're changing the world like you always planned to. Vera. I read the email 3 times before deleting it. A year later, I was promoted to program director. My educational initiatives had been so successful that other cities were requesting similar programs. I was invited to speak at conferences and universities about innovative approaches to youth development. During one of these speaking engagements at my alma mater, a student approached me afterward. I heard about what happened with your friend, she said quietly. How did you know to document everything? How did you have the courage to fight back? I thought about her question for a moment. I almost didn't, I admitted. It would have been easier to accept what happened and move on, but I realized that if I let her get away with it, I'd be teaching her that my life and work had no value, that she could take what she wanted without consequences. Do you regret how it ended? I regret that she made choices that destroyed our friendship, I said. But I don't regret holding her accountable. Sometimes protecting yourself and your future requires you to be willing to stand alone. The student nodded thoughtfully. As she walked away, I realized that my experience with Vera had shaped not just my career path, but my entire approach to relationships and boundaries. I'd learned that trust isn't something you give freely. It's something you build carefully with people who prove they deserve it. I'd learned that loyalty to friends doesn't mean accepting abuse or betrayal. And I'd learned that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones most capable of devastating harm. Now, at 26, I run a department of 12 people. We've launched programs in 8 cities, helping thousands of at-risk youth develop skills and confidence. Last month, I was featured on the cover of Nonprofit Quarterly magazine. My mom is 2 years sober and recently got promoted to head nurse at her hospital. My brother graduated college debt-free thanks to the financial support I was able to provide after getting my job. We bought a house together last year. Nothing fancy, but it's ours. I still think about Vera sometimes, especially when I'm mentoring young women who remind me of who I used to be. I wonder if she's still volunteering, if she ever went back to school, if she learned to build a life based on her own efforts rather than someone else's. But I've stopped feeling sorry for her. Some betrayals are so fundamental that they change the entire structure of your understanding about trust and friendship. Vera didn't just steal an internship. She stole years of my life where I believed I had a true friend who supported my dreams. The person I thought was celebrating my successes was actually cataloging them for future use. The confidant I trusted with my deepest fears was sharing them for entertainment. The sister I chose was systematically undermining me while pretending to care. That kind of deception leaves scars that never fully heal, but it also builds strength and wisdom that can't be stolen or faked. 3 years later, I can honestly say that losing Vera's friendship was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Not because I enjoyed the pain or trauma, but because it forced me to develop the courage to stand up for myself and the discernment to recognize genuine support from manipulation. I've built new friendships now, slower, more carefully, with people who prove their loyalty through actions rather than words. I've learned to trust my instincts when something feels off. I've learned that real friends celebrate your successes without needing to diminish them or claim credit. Most importantly, I've learned that my life and work have value worth protecting, even when that protection requires difficult choices. Sometimes people ask me if I would do anything differently if I could go back. The answer is always no. I would document everything exactly the same way. I would pursue justice with the same determination. I would refuse every attempt at reconciliation, because some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness, and some people don't deserve second chances. Vera taught me that trust, once broken so completely, can never be repaired. But she also taught me that I'm strong enough to survive betrayal and build something better from the pieces. For that lesson, at least, I suppose I should thank her.